Welcome to the Beauty Equation podcast, where beauty meets biology, psychology, and art history. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Christelle Oliver-Dussault, Dr. Harpreet Lotay, and a beauty industry expert, Amanda Manholt. This is your space to reclaim agency over aging and beauty on your terms. We're cutting through the noise with evidence-based insights and real talk about aging, self-perception, and modern treatments. No quick fixes, no fluff. Just honest conversations to empower you to define beauty for yourself. Welcome back to the Beauty Equation. I'm Dr. Christelle Oliver-Dussault.
And I'm Dr. Harpreet Lotay.
And I'm Amanda Manholt.
Today we're going to be switching gears a little bit and talking about certain common appearances that we all experience and how they affect us. Have you ever had a really good night's sleep, feeling rested and energized, and then you walk into work and one of your colleagues looks at you and says, "You look tired. Are you feeling okay?" That comment stings so much, especially when you feel rested.
I don't know why people feel the need, right? Honestly. Why do people have to say those things? But I had it today in a consult. It's so common. People are like, I just feel like I look so tired all the time. Even if I've slept, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's unfair because some of these changes are just associated with how humans age, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you're right, those comments hurt. One of the reasons that it can be really impactful for people, I find, especially as you get older, in your 40s or maybe 50s, is oftentimes women in those age groups are really reaching the top of their careers. They're very accomplished. They feel very good about their capacity and their capability, but oftentimes their face doesn't really reflect that vitality, and they become really concerned that they're going to be judged as maybe less capable or less able to perform those high achieving sort of jobs that they're in. And so that actually becomes a concern later on in their careers. I don't know if you've seen that, Amanda.
Yeah, I think it speaks to relevance.
Totally.
Right. I remember one woman we had in a few years back, and she was sort of, she wasn't ready to retire, but she'd certainly had way more years in than all of the junior staff, but she felt like she was invisible. So that is definitely a thing. I am tired. I just don't want to look tired. I mean, like that's my thing.
And I think we get that a lot. As you enter kind of perimenopause and menopause, there's so many changes that happen to your mind and your body. And, in my time in general practice, that's such a common complaint that I would get and I still get. It's just, I feel really tired. I feel off. I don't feel like myself. And while, you're working on those things yourself through lifestyle and sometimes you need medication, sometimes you want your appearance, you almost want to fake it until you make it. And then other times you've done all that work and you feel great, yet that's not reflected on the outside. And that's where we come in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's probably in terms of, if you think about age, like 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, I don't know. I feel like that one is the tired aspect. I feel like it's one we hear earlier. Like, people in their 30s.
It's one I definitely noticed in myself and would say that's probably one of the things that bother me the most, especially after having children, because those early years you're very sleep deprived and there's just no amount of makeup that is going to fix those dark circle and that drained look. And even as you recover, it just seems like there are certain changes that happen after your pregnancies where your anatomy is slightly different and you just can never get that refreshed look, even when your baby starts to sleep again and they're sleeping through the night. And that can be really frustrating.
Yeah, it is one of the earliest areas that we start to see changes physiologically. We start to see that sort of loss of mid-face fat volume. So if you think about a 16-year-old human, they have nice full cheeks. So the next time you see a teenager, just take a look. They have fat pads that go all the way up to their orbital rim and super full. And that starts to thin out and they start to look mature and, more adult-like in their 20s and then into their mid-20s. And So that loss of mid-face fat volume really contributes to that look of tiredness because you start to
Mhm.
see that orbital rim, the edge of it, as that fat regresses. And I find it kind of interesting from an aesthetics perspective because you have these 18-year-olds who will come in for filler and they'll come in for augmentation and enhancement. And one of the things that I've noticed is oftentimes those young people will get aesthetic treatments and they will end up looking older. And they're
Mhm.
almost gunning for that and wanting to do that. And there's some
Mhm.
subtle anatomical reasons why, and we can get into that in other episodes. But that mid cheek area is a real signaler for age and
Mhm.
then tiredness, like you mentioned. And that 30-year sort of benchmark is really common where people will come in and start to notice
Mhm.
hollowing. They'll say hollowing, they'll use
Yeah.
words like dark circles, they'll say things like
Mhm.
sunken. So it's
Mhm.
kind of how we age. And I think
Yeah.
to your point, Christelle, where you've gone through pregnancy, you've had sleep deprivation, and having those signs that are there that are accelerated by stress,
Mhm.
sleeplessness,
Mhm.
cortisol changes, you don't want to see it in the mirror because it's almost like PTSD. You're like, I don't want to be
Mhm.
reminded of that time.
Yeah.
I'm over
Yeah.
it.
You know
Yeah.
what? That is so true. Oftentimes women come in to see me and they have had some major shift in their life, whether they
Mhm.
perhaps have a marriage that's ended or they've been caring for their parent that's, ailing. They kind of come through something and then they say to me, I look in the mirror and all I see is the exhaustion I felt at that period of time in my life, or the
Mhm.
sadness or the rage, right? So
Yeah.
I think emotional attributes are quite fascinating. And
Mhm.
if we've it's what I love about what you guys both do. I think when people get sort of hyper fixated on a particular line, a
Mhm.
particular shadow, um, and they're trying to guide their practitioner to just address that one little issue,
Mhm.
it often doesn't solve the problem. And the problem is they don't want to look tired, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really necessarily understand the emotional attributes
No.
of that, right?
Yeah, and there's so many changes that happen there. So if you start at the deepest layer, your bone, as you get older, your orbit, so the eye socket actually enlarges. So
Yeah.
there's more room for things to sink. And then if you move a little way up, then we have all those cushions. Those cushions, when you see in a baby or a teenager, like you mentioned, Harpreet, that offer that fullness. And we really notice that, like you said, in the mid cheek and also in the temples. And
Mhm.
oftentimes that's one that is harder for people to understand because it's above the eye, it's not underneath it. Yet when you replenish the volume there, all of a sudden the under eye does start to look brighter.
Mm.
And then if you address the cheek area where you would previously have had, because of the bit of that sunkenness and the loss of fat, that like dark line goes all the way down. And it's okay to have a bit of darkness close around the eye, but if it keeps going down, that's what gives you that drawn and tired look. And then there's ligaments that come into play, and also the skin too. Not
Mhm.
the dark circles aren't always, because of a thin skin or the hue. Sometimes it's pigmentation that can happen in pregnancy as well. So it's a very complex area, and there's
Mhm.
lots of different ways we can address it based on the reason why uh,
Mhm.
you have that appearance of being tired.
Yeah, I think the assessment, to your point, it really
Mhm.
is so important, right? So a lot of people will go and buy all these eye brighteners
Mhm.
and all these sort of, filter powders and things that are reflective. And early on, when you start to see some of those anatomical changes, that will certainly help and
Mhm.
blur the area. But at some point, people will notice it's not really doing the trick. Their concealer really isn't working. That blur stick thing isn't really working. And it's because you're either seeing advanced skin changes where you've got
Mhm.
crepiness and wrinkling. And that
Mhm.
alone, that skin change, the wrinkliness, can add to the appearance of tiredness.
Mhm.
Um, and then, it could be volume loss in and of
Mhm.
itself, that cheek fat going away, and no amount of blurring is going to take away a
Mhm.
divot. right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. So assessing, is it the skin that's contributing? Is it the volume that's contributing, whether it be in the temple or in the mid face? Or
Mhm.
does the person truly have volume loss in the tear trough will really dictate what's going to work best for that person.
I
So
like
it's,
the little thing that you taught me to do is where if they've got their hair, like, okay, let's
yes.
face it, I have gone back to bangs. I used to say it's bangs or Botox. Now I say it's both because I naturally luckily enough, have a pear-shaped head, which matches my pear-shaped body. And I just the natural shape of my skull is smaller in this
Mhm.
area here. And it is one of those areas where we can address with filler. I think it's trickier on someone with my anatomy, for example. So yes, we can do a little bit of volume in this anterior part of the temple, but I could also just put my hair over top, and then it adds some volume here, and I find it just can hopefully it looks
Balances.
better.
Amanda's referring to for people who are listening on the podcast is the temple area or the area just beside your eyebrow can get kind of deeper. And so sometimes that's described as peanut head. So if you think about the
Mhm.
planter's peanut guy, so that shape is how we naturally age. And that sort of divot that happens just next to your eyebrow can be
Mhm.
distracting to the eye. And a lot of people
Mhm.
don't realize that that is contributing to their look of tiredness,
Mhm.
like Christelle said. So oftentimes when we're assessing people's photos, we'll just cover that area up. And you can do that yourself at home by just bringing your
Mhm.
hair forward and ask yourself, do I look better with my hair forward?
Mhm.
And if so, then the temples could be contributing to that look of tired or not just like looking older. And I would say
Mhm.
temple volume loss actually contributes to the look of looking a little older, even
Yeah.
more than looking tired. And that's actually why when younger people get the supermodel look with the cheekbones augmented,
Mhm.
it will make it look like you have volume loss in the temple because
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a change in relative volume, even though they don't have any temporal volume loss, they can
Yeah.
look older. So all these little subtle things that the human eye picks up are really um, they're really impactful. So yeah,
Mhm.
you can bring your hair forward and cover the temple area up and just ask yourself, do I look better? And that
Mhm.
could tell you if temple filler is an option for you or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think certain in and all of these things we talk about are sort of in general terms, but it's interesting because you'll see somebody that is, they could both be 40 years old, two people that are 40, and one person can just naturally have that very flat mid face,
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
right? Whereas somebody else could have much oh, and
Yeah.
I probably felt the best at about 35.
Yeah.
Because we all have fat cheeks in my family.
Yeah.
So I had started to lose some facial volume. I didn't really understand it at the
Mhm.
time because I wasn't doing this kind of work. And I remember thinking,
Yeah.
I got a little, oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Then it
Like
keeps
all of a
going.
sudden the chipmunk cheeks are gone. I used to have them in my 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point, Harpreet, you were talking about these younger girls, like the sort of, we call them, say, beautifiers that are looking to, improve certain aspects.
Mhm.
There's been some over the years where they come in and they don't like being cute.
Mhm.
No, they want to look sexy.
They want to be
Yeah.
sexy and they want to look grown up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I often think of like Bella Hadid when you look at her transformation.
Yeah.
You can really see
Yeah.
how she went from having that younger 20-year-old face to that elevated cheekbone look. So we keep
Yeah.
going back to younger people trying to look older, but we're wanting to focus on the tired look. So we talked about the volume loss around the temple, the
Yes.
sunken eyes and fillers. But in terms of addressing the skin quality and trying to determine pigmentation versus hollowness, what are some tricks that we could give to people, Harpreet?
So you can check in about 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take a look at the area that you consider dark, just take your finger and just put it underneath the area and retract the skin down. Try to move the skin. And if the pigment or darkness that you're seeing moves with it, that means the darkness or pigment is in the skin itself. And
Mhm.
so at that point, we need to treat the skin with things like kojic acid, mild retinols, things like that,
Mhm.
vitamin C to help the skin pigment.
Mhm.
And you can also use lasers to help the skin.
Mhm.
And you can try to thicken the skin up and get it to turn over a little bit more to release the
Mhm.
pigment. If the pigment is bluish and it doesn't really move with the skin, then it could be venostasis.
Mhm.
And that is a structural issue. And you can sometimes help that by thickening up the skin itself using growth factors, maybe some PRP. And
Mhm.
PRP can be helpful with pigmentation that's within the skin as well. So those are issues are different than volume loss. So if you
Mhm.
move the skin and you still see some hollowing and it's almost like a linear hollowing and you can see kind of a divot, that's volume loss and it could be true tear trough
Mhm.
deformity. It's not a deformity, but that could be how your tear trough is structured. And you might benefit from filler,
Mhm.
small amounts done judiciously.
Mhm.
So those are a few tips and tricks if you're
Mhm.
self-assessing.
Thankfully, there's less people coming in going, I want my tear troughs treated.
Mhm.
It was quite popular, I'd say 5 years ago. Um,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
probably one of the last things that we ever do.
Yeah, I'm going to let Christelle speak to that. So when someone
Yeah.
comes in and you're thinking, I want to do their tear trough, tell me a little bit about how you approach it and what you think about when you decide.
So the tear trough, as Amanda was saying, it is really tricky. And the reason why we do it last is because if you put too much volume in there, or it's not true volume deficit, you're going to end up looking puffy. So you're going to have a puffy under eye, which is another thing
Mhm.
that can happen as you get older and makes you look more tired. So that's the last thing we want to do. And that goes back to, again, addressing the volume around the temples and the mid cheek. And sometimes that's enough and you don't need to do anymore. And
Mhm.
if then we do need to replace a little bit of volume, we can, but often we'll undertreat just because of that risk. Because if we're putting something there, we all have lymph that goes around our face or bodies, and it naturally drains. But if you have too much filler in there, it can block the drainage, so
Mhm.
increase that puffiness. So
Mhm.
be particularly careful around people who have a lot of allergies, so like seasonal
Mhm.
allergies or prone to swelling in their eyes. That's just a little bit of a red flag that we may actually make that worse. And then
Mhm.
in which case we have other modalities like Dr. Lotay mentioned, the PRP. So what PRP is we take your own blood and we extract the plasma, which has all those growth factors. So that will help stimulate your collagen, thicken the skin. So the quality will be better and then you won't have that hue and that volume deficit won't be as noticeable. Lasers, as you mentioned, or sometimes things like radiofrequency microneedling can help. So there are a
Mhm.
lot of tools and it often takes different approaches and multiple visits to get to address that tired eye look,
Yeah.
if that.
Less is more in that area for
Mhm.
sure, as you mentioned. And the other caveat I would say is that oftentimes when we start to look at an area, it's not uncommon for patients to get really fixated on completely obliterating a contour.
Yeah.
And I can't stress enough that it's very natural to have contours in certain areas. And it's important to preserve that so that you look natural
Yeah.
and not to fixate on just that contour, just like Amanda was mentioning. Like, we're not here to make the line go away necessarily. We're here to make you look more beautiful and refreshed and more like who you are. So, yeah, those contours are important for light. Light and shadow
Mhm.
looks beautiful. When we're looking at art and painting, contrast looks beautiful. Don't
Mhm.
get rid of it.
Yeah.
For
You
sure.
look like you were going to
The
say
other,
something, Amanda, but like almost like you had a
oh,
joke.
I was just, no, I was also thinking about it's interesting when people have had allergies for the majority of their life. You can almost pick them out once you start to get good at assessing faces.
Yeah.
There is that quality to the skin around the eye that is tends to be a little duller, a little crepier, almost a little bit more compromised. And I don't know if it's
Mhm.
because they've rubbed their eyes so much,
Yes.
or if they've had this constant, expansion and contraction of with the
Mhm.
swelling. Yeah, the eyes are such a very complex thing. So
Yeah.
skin it is as well is going to have an impact too on reflectivity of light.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I feel like we could do an entire episode on the eyes. It's so complex.
And this is really just a little taster to make you
Yeah.
understand that. If you're seeing something, be prepared to have a discussion about other areas of your face and how they're impacting that. That there are multiple tools, and based on your ethnicity, your bone structure, your medical history, we're going to change the way that we approach that. And really, if you look tired, it's information. It's not necessarily a flaw. It's telling us of regarding some changes that are happening. And if you're feeling finally rested and you want to match the inside, we can do that. If you're absolutely exhausted and you want to fake it till you make it, we can do that as well.
and if you walk into work and someone looks tired, don't say, "Gee, you look tired today," because that's just rude.
Tips for keeping friends 101.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to add to the looking tired episode?
I just wanted to say, like, is there any other aspects of the face besides sort of the cheek and the eyes where you feel like tired ever comes into play? Or is that always different attributes typically, for example, in the lower part of the face?
Yeah. You know what? I think tired is pretty much an upper and mid face.
Mhm.
I would challenge that, and I would say skin and
Yes, 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 yes. You're
having
right.
tech the tone of the skin, the color of the skin not
Mhm.
being uniform, to me, reads as tired. When the
Yes,
skin
and
looks mottled and dirty,
yes,
Like
and
dull,
you know
like
what?
dull
That really
skin.
speaks to understanding what your patient is saying too. So that really brings to mind a patient that we had that you had a conversation with Amanda and she kept saying, I look tired. I look tired. And when we did the assessment with her and we did our usual techniques of trying to understand by covering parts of her face and looking at her anatomy, and she did have mid face volume loss. She did have a little bit of temple volume loss, but she didn't see it. And we felt like we were sort of talking around each other in the
Mhm.
conversation. And then finally sort of said to her, like, why don't we fix your skin? Because she had lots of irregular pigmentation, she had
Mhm.
dullness, she had sun damage. But because she couldn't really see some of the structural things we were pointing out, filler may not have made her feel better or made her
Mhm.
feel less tired. And I think that's key. It's important to make sure your patient is seeing what you're seeing so that your recommendation is going to make them happier, because that's really what we're here for. So we did a halo and a BBL, and she was so happy, over the moon. That made her feel like she looked less tired. And to your point,
Mhm.
Amanda, she did. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
so like I said, it isn't one size fits all.
No.
So
Mhm.
everybody's anatomy is different. And to your point, what people see is different too. And I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes I just want to go, oh my God, you need a chin so bad. But I don't. Because if
Yeah.
they don't see it, I'm not here to point out things
No.
that don't bother
No.
people.
No, and
No.
our job is to understand the one thing that's bothering them most. So to your point, that's a
Exactly.
really good
What's going to make
example,
them
Harpreet. Like
feel better.
she was seeing actually more the uniform dullness and irregularities in her skin, and she wanted that brightness back. And she would have spent a lot of money on fillers, and it would not have gotten her the result that she wanted. So that's why having that conversation is so important, and understanding what the patient is seeing, because
Yes.
it doesn't always match what we see as a priority.
People, they know what they want
Mhm.
sometimes, but they don't know what they need.
Mhm.
And it isn't like you're ordering sushi off a menu, right?
Yeah, it's your decision making conversations. And I love the aha moments when they're like, oh, yeah, I do see that. Or, like you
Mhm.
said, after they've had their treatment and you feel like, yes, we went down the right path. And she or he will feel like we went down the right path. There's no
Yeah.
greater feeling than that.
Yeah.
For
We,
sure.
we covered a lot of ground,
We
from
did.
temples to cheeks to skin. So I hope that people got a lot of good information out of it, and it
Yeah.
should help everybody make some good decisions when they go in to see their practitioners. And as always with our episodes, we really encourage you to ask your questions, message us at info@thebeautyequation.com.
Yeah. And if you had questions about today, about the tired look, or you feel like there's an area you wanted to, get us to dive a bit deeper, send us a message or put comments below.
Yeah.
And next time, I believe we'll be talking about the angry face.
Yes.
AKA, I'm going to say it, resting bitch face.
Before we wrap up, just a quick reminder. While we're medical professionals, everything shared on the Beauty Equation is for informational purposes only and isn't intended as medical advice. This podcast doesn't establish a doctor-patient relationship, and any medical or aesthetic decision should always be made with a qualified healthcare provider. Our views are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of our employers or affiliated organizations. And remember, the field of aesthetics is always evolving, so information may change over time. See you next time on the Beauty Equation.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need to hear it too. We'd love to hear your thoughts or questions. You can send us an email at info@thebeautyequation.com, and you might hear your question answered in future episodes. You can also find us on Instagram at Dr. Christelle MD, at Lotay MD, and at Crow's Feet and Confidence. Until next time, keep questioning the equation.